I'm Lyndon Rego. I'm with the Center for Creative Leadership, and it's my privilege to have this opportunity to spend some time with you today. So the Center for Creative Leadership is an organization that's focused exclusively on leadership development, and by and large we've been known for actually helping senior level leaders in large companies, Fortune 500 companies around the world, get better at being leaders, right? But what we're doing in an effort that I lead, which is called Leadership Beyond Boundaries, and I'm the Global Director of Leadership Beyond Boundaries, is to actually reach many more people in the world and reach them younger, at earlier stages in their life, when they have the potential to actually make a greater difference and lead their lives in ways that can create greater impact in the world. I wanted to introduce myself a little bit more and tell you how I came to do this work. So I grew up in India, and as a young person back in India in the 70s and 80s, I saw a lot of poverty around me. And that poverty exists even today, but it was much more significant in those days. And as a person who became aware of the lives of other people who lived in the streets, who lived by the railroad tracks, I felt somewhat powerless to make a difference. I came from a middle-class family, and although I could maybe give a little bit of money to people who were in need that I encountered, it wasn't making a very significant difference. So I wound up coming to study in the United States of America about 30-some years ago. And through the course of my education, decided that I wanted to work in non-profit organizations. So I worked in the sector either on the management side or on the consulting side. And wound up about 10, 12 years ago, actually going back to business school at the University of North Carolina and encountering notions of leadership and innovation. And these were transformational for me, because I suddenly saw ways in which these could actually make a greater shift in the world in ways that I hadn't fully seen. So I'm delighted actually to have the opportunity to work with you at the WeSchool, because I was able to work with a group of students last year through the Global Citizen Leader Program, where we went on a journey of about 6 months that was helping these young people think about themselves in different ways and build the kind of capabilities and skills that allowed them to create greater impact as leaders. So today actually I'd love to share with you some of my thinking about leadership and how you can become more effective as a leader. So let's start with that notion, because I know it's very much the theme for the week here at the WeSchool as you're getting into place, as you're settling into a new role and thinking about your journey ahead. So what is leadership? What's it about? How do you become a better leader? And what are some of the things that you could be doing over the course of the next couple of years that you'll be at the WeSchool? Right? So I'd like to share with you a model that I like, and you'll see it's a model that is thinking about notions of impact. And by and large, we might all think about leadership as how we can create greater impact in the world. So it's impact in our own lives, in the lives of others, in our organizations, but hopefully also in society, making this a better world. And this model connects that impact with personal development and personal transformation. It recognizes that the change that we're able to bring about in the world is a reflection of the change that we bring about in ourselves. This is an expression of the idea that Gandhi talked about at great length: be the change you want to see in the world. So let me unpack that a little bit. So in this model, you'll see that the first level here is about leading self. So leading self is really about understanding who you are, where you're trying to go in your life, understanding yourself at the level of strengths and weaknesses, and actually motivating and managing yourself and your energy so that you live up to that purpose, that you're able to create some of the things that you want. The second level is what we might call leading with others or working with others. And it's a recognition that not very much happens in the world alone, that actually outcomes are the result of people working together in concert to achieve results. So you can think about the interpersonal skills, the soft skills, and these are things that employers really tell us are lacking for many people that come to them for jobs. They might have book knowledge, they might understand things at a theoretical level, but when it really comes down to actually making them happen in the workplace, they have to work in teams. Or if they're managers, they have to motivate other people to create results. And they often find that they might not have the communication skills. They may not have skills that are around teamwork. They might not have the resilience. They might not know how to deal with conflict. These are some of the things that fall into the category of working more effectively with others. And finally, it's an expression of changing your world. I think as a person setting out on the world today in your role at the WeSchool and looking forward to life, I bet that you want to create great change, that you want to have a significant impact. You didn't come to the WeSchool to live a life in a very ordinary way, that you actually see yourselves as somebody who has greater potential. But this model says that that potential rests on your ability to manage yourself and lead your life in line with your own purpose, and also work effectively with other people to make things happen, right? And I'd like to share with you yet another reframing of this. And I think if you think about life in the context of work, it gets you to one place. But we might also think about our lives in line with well-being and happiness. And if you look at it in this way, you'll see that I've got a flower that's growing here, so it's about growth, but it's looking at these three dimensions from a different way. That the first dimension of leading self is really about purpose and meaning. How do I live a life of purpose? How do I live a life that's true to myself and true to my values and is true to the things that I want to create for myself? A second dimension is around relationships. Happiness is very much related to the relationships that we can have with our family, with our friends, with our colleagues at school or in the workplace. These are all dimensions of relationship, and our ability to live in harmony with them, create happiness and a sense of fun and belonging are very much the keys to well-being. The third dimension is really around contribution. And actually, we feel happy when we're able to make things happen, right? If we feel that we are equipped to bring about change and enhance things. Again, once again in our lives, in the lives of our families, in the lives of our friends and the wider world, contribution, actually making change happen, is something we all think about and all related to this personal sense of well-being and happiness, right? So let's think then about those three dimensions and get a little bit further into that space. You can think about leadership as really a journey of improving yourself. And if you come back to this model of leading self, you can think about self as related to three domains yet again. In this model, it's about being, knowing, and doing. And you can think about the outer layer of doing as skills and capabilities that you might have for doing things. You've probably come to the WeSchool because you'd like to be more effective in your skills. Maybe it is around analysis of financial statements, for instance. It might become related to your skills around marketing and communications. Those might be certain areas that you might be focused on. It's also about knowledge, and by and large an educational institution is about equipping you with concepts, methodologies, knowledge and theories that are very important. Fundamentally, and I think this is what the WeSchool recognizes, is that change and transformation is about that sense of being as well, that sense of identity. Who are you and what are you trying to do? And if you're in touch with that identity, it provides you with the motivation to acquire the knowledge you might need. It helps you, equips you to go after the skills that you might need. And frankly, today in the world is changing very, very quickly. The half-life of knowledge is always shrinking. The skills and the knowledge you have today are not going to be adequate to carry you through the rest of your lives. You're going to have to be a continual leader, a continual learner as well. And what enables you to learn is the motivation you bring. And it's that inside-out process that we're talking about here that starts with your sense of being. Who are you? What are you about? What is it that you want to do in the world, right? So it's those three areas that we're talking about here. So what I'd like you to do now is actually do an activity. Hopefully you've got a notebook or a sheet of paper, and I'd like you to draw 3 columns on that sheet of paper that stand for doing, knowing, and being. And think about where you'd like to be at the end of your WeSchool process. 2 years have gone by and you're now a different person. How are you going to be different at the end of this journey, right? What are you going to know that's different? What are you going to do that's different? And how are you different in your own capability? Are you somebody who's more confident? Are you somebody who's more creative? Are you somebody who's able to deal with failure differently? Are you somebody who's able to connect with other people differently? Are you somebody who's happier? Are you somebody who's resilient? Whatever are those qualities, those are some of the things that you might think about in the being space. So I'd like to invite you to take about 3 minutes now and actually write down a number of attributes in each of these areas. Think about yourself at the end of this process, at the end of your WeSchool journey, and think about what is different about yourself, if it really is something that lives up to your hopes and expectations. So take about 3 minutes. We'll work in silence now, and I'm going to ask the facilitators to put the camera or to put actually the video on pause for a moment so that you can complete this. And we'll come back and I'll tell you what we'll do next. Okay, so I expect you've had about 3 minutes now to complete this, and you've got a number of statements that reflect what your hopes are for this journey over the next couple of years. So I'd like you to now actually have the opportunity to share what you've written down with somebody who might be sitting beside you. So what you're going to do is actually turn to somebody beside you, and we're going to take about 5 minutes or so to do this, and you're going to kind of introduce yourself, and you're going to do it in this way and say, talk about where you're from. So if you are somebody who's come from Mumbai, maybe you're from Delhi, maybe you're from Chennai or someplace else in India, so you can talk about where you're from and just introduce yourself that way, and then talk about where you're going. And it's about these 3 areas. What do you hope is going to be different about yourself over the next couple of years? So you're going to turn to somebody and have this conversation, and then you're going to let them also share with you what they're about, where they're from, and where they're going. So take about 5 minutes so that you each have a couple of minutes to have this conversation. So I'm going to ask again for the facilitators to put this video on pause for a moment so that you get a chance to do that, and we'll come back again. So great. I bet you had a good conversation, that you've probably had a chance to get to know some people that you didn't know before, and you're starting to see what are the possibilities for what it might be like to be at the WeSchool and meet a lot of smart people who've come from different places, and it opens up the potential for connections. It's that middle realm that we're talking about actually, of relationships and getting to know other people and figuring out what are the connects that bring you together and how you can be more effective in working with them as well. I'd like to maybe also ask you that maybe as you did this, as you started to talk about yourself in a certain kind of way, it required a measure of openness for you, a sense of vulnerability, right? As you thought about what are some of the things that you might like to be doing, and you might have felt, well, are people going to judge me? Or are they going to think a certain way about me that I'm not so sure about? And I think learning comes from this space of vulnerability. Because if you feel that you know it all, or if you have to appear like you know it all, there's very little that you can learn. Because you already are perfect, right? There's nothing that you can change about yourself. But it's actually acknowledging that there are things that you'd like to become, things you'd like to change about yourself that create the opportunity for growth. So it's very important to focus on that and recognize that you're here at the WeSchool to learn. And it's okay to not necessarily know it all. And actually, as you'll discover over the course of the next couple of years, that oftentimes things that don't go so well are rich opportunities to learn. So I'd like to share with you a certain kind of story that I think you might find inspirational. I have as well. And it's a story that comes to us from the beginning of the last century, the 20th century, when the movie industry was really starting out. And so there was a young man who was a cartoonist, and he had created a cartoon of this lovable, funny bear. And he hooked up with some movie producers in these old days. These was the days of black and white movies and actually silent movies as well. And he got into working with them to actually create a little movie clip that would play before the main attraction at the movies. And it was about this funny bear. It was a huge hit. People loved it, you know. And so as time went on, they produced a number of these films that got to play around the United States. And a year went by, and this young man was coming back to the movie studio to renew his contract. It had gone really well, and in the morning he had been talking with his wife and talking about how this was a great opportunity for them, how he was going to go and talk to them about the ideas that he had for how they could take things further. He was going to kind of ask for a raise and pay so that they could maybe buy a new house, so they could buy a car, because this was about, again, moving up in life. So anyway, he got to the studio, and the head of the studio sat him down and said, you know, we've had a terrific year. I can't thank you enough for all the things that you've been able to do for us. It's been tremendous. We've got something that's truly great, and congratulations on that. And the person said, you know, we've had so much success that I want to tell you that we are able to take things forward now. And thanks to the contributions you've made, that we don't necessarily need you anymore because we've got this lovable bear that you created, and we've got a studio full of artists who can kind of create this cartoon, and so I want to wish you good luck. And so this young man was devastated. You know, this wasn't what he had expected. You know, he'd come in with great hopes of how things could go even better and how he could take this relationship with the studio even further, and it had gone completely in the other direction. So as he was riding home in a tram and thinking about, what am I going to say to my wife? You know, this completely is a disaster. And he was maybe feeling a little sorry for himself, but he didn't stay there very long. He started to think about, well, you know, this has been a good experience. I've also learned a great deal. I've had a success under my belt. You know, I've got to work in the movies, and I've started to understand its industry, and I've started to build relationships with a lot of other people in the sector, people who are artists, and people who are producers, and people who are distributors. And you know, I've had an idea for another character that I might create that I was really excited about, this funny kind of mischievous mouse. And I wonder if I could kind of take what I know and create another character, and this time I'll make sure that I have the rights to the character. And thus Mickey Mouse was born, and the person that we're talking about is Walt Disney. And Walt Disney, over the course of his lifetime, created a fabulous entertainment empire that today is reflected in movie studios named after him, and theme parks, and of course a whole range of other products, whether they're in the entertainment or the educational world. Enormously successful person, but Walt Disney was somebody who failed a great deal in his life. He went bankrupt a number of times. But what was special about him, and what's special about a number of people who are successful in their life, is that they don't let failure stop them. They really see failure as a learning opportunity. They say, well, what can I learn from what didn't go so well, and what could I do differently? And how do I keep myself focused on the things that I want to create? That's why the power of intention. So when you talked about and you wrote down what are the things that you'd like to do over the next couple of years, that's why it's so important. It's really important to have that intention. And this capability that people like Disney had would be something that we would call a growth mindset. That they didn't stay stuck with the things that were wrong, the things that held them back, the past failures, but they really focused on their aspirations. They focused on the things they wanted to create, and they were constantly thinking about, well, if things don't go so well right now, what do I learn? What do I do differently? So it's really important that you become much, much more clear about what those mean for you, because it'll help you get through the hard times. So it gets me back to the next activity that I'd like you to do, and it's something called the Tree of Life, and we'll spend a lot more time with this activity. I'd like to share it with you. So I've drawn it out here, and hopefully you can see this on your screen there, but you'll see that this is a tree, and it's got roots, and it's got a trunk, and it's got some branches, and each of these symbolize something that you're going to kind of map out for yourself in terms of your own journey. So the roots are things that are values. They are about your identity, what keeps you grounded, what keeps you strong, just like a tree is anchored to the ground by its roots. So in this model, there are a set of roots, and I've labeled them, but I'll come back to that. The branches are aspirations, hopes. What are the things that you want for yourself over the course of time? What is it that you want to create? You might have many hopes, and we'll talk about that. The trunk of the tree is, how do you actually use what you have to create what you want? So it's about the realm of action. This is the potential that you have as an individual to make change happen. That's why you're at the WeSchool, and that's how the WeSchool is perhaps best able to equip you to say, well, what are the things that you want to do, that you want to learn? How do you want to grow so that you can create what you want out of your life? And finally, there is an area that's represented here as a thunderbolt. That are, what are the things that maybe can damage your tree, maybe take down some of the branches, or perhaps bring the whole tree down that you have to watch out for. So let's look at the roots in this model here, and I've kind of created an illustrative example. So in here I have roots such as family. So I can say as an individual, my family is really important to me. That ultimately those are the people that keep me safe, that give me a sense of values, that give me a sense of purpose. For some people it might be things like faith and their religion. And to say, well, God or the divine presence is very important to my life, and I know that gives me meaning, it gives me a sense of purpose in my life, and I want to make sure that I recognize the value of that. It might be around education as well. You've come to the WeSchool partly because you believe that education matters, that can make a difference, and you might put a great deal of importance on learning, and perhaps you've always done so. And there might be things that might be more in this personal realm that you might like to do for fun. You might have a love of cricket, for instance, and if you have any time, you'd love to play cricket, or you'd love to watch the games on television, whatever it is for you. But it's important to recognize that that's part of who you are. That's part of your identity, and it's something that makes you enjoy your life. Or it might be personal things like running, or reading, or going to the movies. Anything that's there that you say, well, that's part of who I am. That's part of what makes me enjoy my life. And here in the space of aspirations and dreams, right, you might have things such as, well, you might like to be healthy, that you might say, well, it doesn't matter how much money you have, or how much success you have, but if you're sick and you don't have good health, it's not a very good life. Or you might say, well, I'm really interested in professional success, and I'd like to be the CEO of a company, or I'd like to start my own business, or I'd like to go back to my hometown and do X. I would like to create something there. You probably got some ideas that are in your head about the things that, if there were no obstacles in your way, if you could do whatever you want, what are some of those things you would wish for yourself? It might also be about being happy. I place a great deal of value on happiness, and happiness is what makes life worth living. And happiness can be an extension of some of these other things, but it's also important to recognize that you might like to be happy, and what are the things that create happiness for you. And they might be family as well, and say, well, I'd like to have a family of my own someday with children, and like to make sure that I can raise my children in a way that they are successful, they have a greater sense of well-being. I'd like to have a happy family life. That's what I equate success with. You might think about things like travel and say, well, hey, I'd love to travel around India and go and live in different places and just work all around the world. That might be something that's important to you. Chances are these things are different for all of us. Some things are going to be similar. But it'll be important for you to actually take some time to really say, well, what is it about? What do I equate with success? And what does happiness and success look like to me? So now the trunk of the tree is helping us think about how do we take what we have to create what we want, right? And in this case, I've written down a few things. I've talked about, well, I might recognize that I need to work hard, that if I want to be successful in school, or I want to be the head of a company, it's going to take a lot of effort, and I really need to be motivated, and I must be willing to work hard and be dedicated. I might think about, in this case, in terms of being healthy, that I might need to exercise and say, well, I can be very, very busy, but if I don't take care of myself, I don't take care of my health, I might get sick and everything might come crashing down, right? It might mean also to say that, well, I enjoy some of these things like cricket or running in this case, and I want to be happy. So how do I actually make some time to have fun? So there's going to be a lot of demands on me over the next couple of years. But if I can't take some time to actually enjoy my life, I'm not going to be very happy. So that might be something that's important to me. In this case, I drew the thunderbolt, the thing that could damage the tree. I've written things like, well, what's going to destroy my tree? What's going to bring it down? What's going to damage it? Maybe it's being lazy and not motivated enough to really do the work that I know that's required. In this case, it might also be distracted, so that when things are always coming up and pulling me away from the things that I know that I might need to be focused on. And those are things that over the course of our life, distractions might take me down a different path. That might be different from the things that I know are really important to me. Right? So you got it. So here is the roots, the things that are your values, a sense of identity that keep you grounded. That the branches, things that your aspirations and your dreams, the things that you want of your life, not only at the end of your 2-year WeSchool experience, but really thinking more largely about your life, because these things take some time to unfold. And this is really about the actions that you might want to remind yourself, what are the things that you really need to do to create the outcomes that you want? And finally, what are the things that you need to watch out for, that are dangers that might take you away from your future? So again, I hope that you can find a blank piece of paper or a sheet in your notebook, and take time to draw your tree and fill it out. I hope that you'll create 6, 7, 8 values, if you will, at the roots, and a number of things that in your branches. I know that there's a lot that represents who you are, so think about all the dreams that you have. It's not just one dream or 2 things. There are many things that I expect you want for yourself. And then think very deliberately about the things that you might need to do to make sure you're able to create this. So once again, I'm going to ask your facilitators in the room to put the video on pause, so you can take about 5 minutes or so to draw out a really detailed tree. And again, try to do this in silence. You might want to look over and see what somebody else is doing, but just draw a tree. There's no wrong answer here. Just take some time to be reflective and capture this tree for yourself in your notebook. And I'll be back with you in a couple of minutes. So great. My hope is that about 5 minutes have gone by and you've all had a chance to create a wonderful tree that is inspiring to yourself. So once again, I think what we're going to do here is to share it with somebody else seated next to you, and perhaps pick somebody who's in front of you or behind you or on the other side of you that you didn't speak with last time, so you get to know somebody else. And what you're going to do is maybe take about 5 minutes apiece to share your tree and talk about who you are and what you want and why did you come to the WeSchool, and what are some of the things that you might need to do to make sure you're successful, the things you might need to do and the things you might not need to do that might get you into trouble or take you away from your goals. So spend about 5 minutes apiece, so about 10 minutes, 12 minutes in all, so that you have enough time to really have a rich conversation with somebody else. So I'm going to ask the facilitators once again in the room to put the video on pause, so we'll take it for about 10 minutes so you can get into having a rich conversation with somebody else in the room. So now again, 10 minutes have gone by and we'll be back again together. I imagine there's a lot of energy in the room. You've probably felt a little bit inspired by being able to surface those wonderful dreams that you might have for yourself, and you might feel positive about the conversations that you've had with somebody else and hearing who they are and finding commonalities, and also being able to express the things that you want for yourself. And you see in that the basis of relationships. There are many people in the room that you don't know today that have great potential to be good friends with you, people that you might stay connected with over the course of a lifetime. And it all comes from being open and being able to connect with them in deeper ways, such as the ones that you have, to be able to tell our own stories, to talk about our dreams and where it is that we'd like to go. So I'd like to bring this to a close with really some summary thoughts that are about living from inspiration. So as you think about the future, we sometimes can get trapped by our fears. The fear of failure, or the fear of looking bad, or the fear of not performing well enough. And I think India in particular, I come from India, is very hard on young people and many people, because the barriers and the notions that are there that we all have to be at the top of our game. But guess what? Life is a journey, and we actually learn from things that don't go so well. And it's important, as Disney did, to focus on the things that represent our dreams, and to work with that, and to understand that there might be setbacks at any time. But those setbacks create learning that will help us be more successful over time. So just focus on the things that you want to create, on that intention, and focus on being a good learner and reflecting in a way on the things that you want, and if things don't go so well, what you could do differently to create greater success. So I want you really to think about the positive notions that represent who you are and what you have to bring to the world, living in the space of possibility. So I'll close with a little story. That's a book from a book called The Art of Possibility. And the story goes like this. Again, it's from the beginning of the last century. And there were two salespeople that were sent by a shoe company over to Africa. And they were sent to investigate the market and see if there was some potential there for selling shoes. And so the two salespeople went on a steamer in those days and went over to Africa. And they spent a few days looking at the market. And the first one wrote back to the company and said, sent a telex as it was in those days, and said, you know, I've spent a couple of days here and the market is horrible. There's no potential for us at all. Nobody here wears shoes. And the second person wrote back and said to his company, the market here is fabulous. You can't believe it. There's ultimate possibility. It's immense. And nobody here wears shoes. Guess what? They both saw the same reality. They saw that there were people there who didn't wear shoes. But one said, well, if there's nobody here wearing shoes, there's not much we can do. But the other one said, well, nobody's wearing shoes here. The market is incredible. We have the opportunity to create shoes and sell shoes to a lot of people who don't have them. So again, the same reality can lead people, depending on their mindset, down two very different paths. And I hope you live in the zone of possibility. I hope you live insight of your dreams. And I hope you take advantage of the next couple of years to bring those dreams to life. And I hope too that I have the opportunity to come and spend time with some of you at the WeSchool. So take care, be well, and I look forward to seeing you.